I had a whole story here set up. I want to get into some of this, but maybe I'll end up bringing Corinne into this conversation if she really wants to get into this. But I have a guest lined up for tonight, and that's Corinne Mori, and she's been a guest on the channel before. She's fantastic. You may have seen the video that we did before. It was about a 3-hour-long conversation talking about all the ins and outs of the healthcare system here in British Columbia, how it's falling apart all across Canada, and how we're not helping people by refusing trained professionals from people being able to work in their field. And well, Corinne is a brilliant lady, and she can chime in on a lot of these different issues. And I think we'll get into this, but for the sake of time, I'm going to cut this story short to get in with Corinne. Corinne, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining again, once again.
Well, geez, when you talk about me like that, how could I not fall in love with myself?
Okay, fair enough. Oh, well, no, you deserve that intro, absolutely, because you are that brilliant lady, and it's really a pleasure having you on this show. To talk about the stuff that you've experienced and the stuff that you're fighting for in Canada.
Well, you know, Clyde, I actually have a few things I'd like to talk about because this last year I have wandered into all sorts of different routes where I've uncovered how little this government is protecting us. And so I'd like to tell you a few different things that I've discovered. But before we start, can I ask you a question?
Oh, shoot. Yeah.
What is one characteristic that you have discovered in yourself that has developed over the last year that wasn't there before?
It wasn't there before. That's a stumper. Holy cow. I really have to consider that. Characteristic that I've discovered within myself that I didn't have, that, oh, wow.
Or maybe you did have, but you just didn't see it in yourself. But what has come to the surface in your being through this process?
Through this process, well, I always thought I was an honest person, but I always questioned myself. If I was put into a situation, would I be able to come clean in situations where I would be, you know, there's always the temptation, you know, when you're in the spotlight and then something goes wrong, you make a mistake, and then you say, oh, if I was in that situation, I would come clean. I'd be a really, you know, honest person and tell everybody I messed up. And then you watch people that you admire and you watch them not do that. And then you feel disappointment in them. I felt that really strongly over the years. And when I've been given that opportunity a few times. Let's just say that over the past year and a half that I've been doing this. And I didn't know if I would have the courage to just come clean to such a large audience of people and be able to say, I messed up. I did something wrong, and I'm sorry for it. And here's the truth, and here's what needs to be said in that scenario. I think that's probably one of the more surprising things that I was able to pull off, because it's really hard. It's really hard. People's egos get to them, and I think I've been surprised at the fact that I've been resilient in being able to keep that ego at bay. I think that's been a hard battle.
What does it feel like to feel proud of yourself?
That's another interesting question. It feels like how I see when I tell my son that, or my daughter, that I'm proud of them. I see that beaming smile in their eyes, in their face, and that's the only way I can describe it, you know. my dad told me he was proud of me over all this stuff, and then my mom tells me she's proud of me for everything, but my dad was my dad told me he was proud of me over all this stuff, and yeah, it gave me that same feeling that I see in my kid's face when I tell them that they did something good. I guess that's the answer I've got for that.
It's nice, eh? It's nice that when you take on a path that has a high level of risk, that you could end up sacrificing or having negative outcomes, yet by walking it, you never really appreciate how magnificent you are as a human being in the capacity that you bring to the planet. And when you finally get to understand how magnificent you are, it's pretty life-giving, isn't it?
Well, I appreciate you saying that. It's so kind of you to say. Thank you. What I would say to that is the risk taking. I see it as like the whole risk of doing this in the first place was rewarded. I didn't think I was going to be rewarded. I thought I would be just saying what I wanted to say to nobody. And I'm not joking, because, not a lot of people were watching what I was doing before. And then the convoy happened, and that all became like the big catalyst for why people started watching the channel. And I just felt it at the time as like my duty to say something, because I didn't want to regret it in the future. I didn't want to look back at a time when I had the opportunity to say something and be that person that just, I didn't do it. And again, like nobody could have watched me. Nobody could have watched me do it, and I would have just been, a face in the crowd. But I would still at least be able to say, at least I said something. I tried. I did it, right? It's turned into this amazing thing. And every time I found myself in a situation where I muck up and I screw up and I say something that isn't true, or, people call me out and they say, Clyde, that's not true. You better correct yourself. I look at it the same way, because the reason why when people have something, say you get to the point where you've got an audience, a lot of people they'll bow down out of the fear of losing what they've got. Oh, if I admit that I was wrong, people won't respect me and all this other stuff, right? So I took the same risk that I took starting it all out, and I look at it that way. If I'm going to take risks, I'm going to take risks the whole way. And I'm not going to be afraid of saying the things that I actually feel in any given moment, even if I don't think that my audience will like it. Maybe my audiences will get upset with me for saying a particular thing, but whatever, they'll at least give me the benefit of the doubt of hearing me out and then disagreeing with me, right? Maybe even changing my mind. But it's about taking risks, and I really gotta agree with you 100% on that one.
So this is my plan for tonight.
Okay.
And you tell me what you think.
Sure.
So I'll give a blurb on the nurses union, because it's kind of important in that there are components of this fight that actually apply to everyone. And then there's 3 other little stories that I'd like to bring up about things that are currently happening in our province that really give us a clear idea of how we've been left out, exposed and unprotected by the systems that are in place. Mm-hmm. If I can get through all that, then you at the end can pick out which of these topics you think is the most interesting, and then we can hash out whatever you want.
Okay, sure. Let's do it.
If that works for you, then I can keep my flow going. I can make it, really tight and not wander off into outer space. And it's just that there's a few things that I think is really important for the public to know in terms of just the maneuvers that the government is doing, so that they can be really aware that they need to protect themselves generally. So if that works for you, I'm going to start.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now I might pop in from here to there and just say a piece, but give her. Let's do this.
Okay. So when you and I talked last, I am actually one of the first nurses that got terminated for non-compliance with the COVID vaccination. Hmm. We had a problem in that when you become a nurse hired by the public institution, so by the government, the health authorities, the day that you get hired, you also have to sign a little card saying that you will become a member of the BC Nurses Union. Hmm. So you cannot get hired for a public institution unless you become a union member. Now, most of us don't know what that really means, except It means that you legally give over all rights of representation in the workplace to the union. You now no longer have any say in what happens to you. And I didn't know that. And I don't think most people know that. 1 in 3 employees in this province are unionized members. And every single one of those unionized members only has representation if your union does their job. So as we proceeded through this whole, it's a very long story, and we got that all last time. All we can say is that after a year, we were still hearing from our CEO, Jim Gould, that he did not want to spend the money on representing us. Now, we are the only province besides Nova Scotia that still has not returned their terminated healthcare workers back to work. This decision was actually not from Bonnie Henry. Most people think that this was because of the public health order that we were terminated, but that never was anything that was in the public health order. It was actually a decision from the health authorities, the employers, to terminate us, which then makes it an employment collective agreement violation. Mm-hmm. So it was the union's duty to step in and represent us, especially since in 2019, they had already gone to bat with the province and amended the flu policy, and arbitration and scientific evidence proved that there was actually no increased protection with flu vaccines or the mask use. And so as a result, nurses were not ever to be disciplined again for not taking this vaccine or for not wearing a mask. That was already decided, 2019. It still happened. And as a result, we are now a year and a half into the process. The only thing that we could do is you can't take unions to court. There is an administrative law umbrella, which is called the Labor Board, and that is the only place that you can file a complaint. So a year after, so September of last year, we filed multiple complaints against our union. The Labor Board has 180 days to resolve these issues. And they not only took the full 180 days, but they extended it and gave themselves time. Now, what I discovered is these vice chairs that are in the Labor Board who do all the decisions between these conflicts between unions, employers, and employees are actually all appointed by Premier Eby. Mm. So that's an interesting dynamic if you are trying to get representation for what the government has done to you. It's interesting that it's the government who provides the people that will make that decision. So it wasn't until our complaints went all the way through that process, 6 months, that we got a decision from the Labor Board saying that they were going to dismiss our complaints, not based on the fact that our evidence wasn't accurate and substantial, but based on the process. So the process is that you are supposed to go through this grievance process. If you get a decision that's against you, then you can appeal it. And if you lose the appeal, then you can go to the Labor Board. In our case, our union just wasn't progressing it. So we couldn't get through that process. So we put in the complaint, and then the Labor Board said, well, you can't use this process because you haven't gone through the process.
So they just stalled it. They just stalled it so you can't do anything about it.
That's right. So then they said, oh, well, the union is doing its job. So now then we find out after that this one process that they're supposed to use when it's multiple people involved is called an IWAD, which is an industrial-wide application dispute. This is basically, they bring in an arbitrator. They get to choose. The union and the employer get to choose which arbitrator they want to use. They can schedule at any time. There's like nobody blocking them from going through this process. Anyways, they finally actually, because of our complaints and the pressure, and I think basically the Labor Board said to them, get your shit together because, you know, there's enough evidence here that you are not doing your job. You better step up. We'll give you a chance. Yeah. So we'll dismiss it, even though they said that we can reapply later. So now finally the union has actually scheduled this process for us to happen. So it's scheduled for March of 2024. And with the possibility that maybe some openings will happen up in September. So we may actually get to arbitration this year. Now, interestingly,
for something that happened in
enough,
2019. Like, this is ridiculous.
well, the terminations happened 2021.
Oh, okay.
So we're talking, it's going to take.
That's still a long time.
But yeah, it's over 2 years, especially in a conflict that doesn't just affect us as nurses. It's affecting the public, because you have seen the whole devastation in the healthcare system by these critical staffing shortages, and especially in rural areas, these services are getting decimated. Mm-hmm. And so it's becoming definitely a public safety issue, and yet nobody's holding these health authorities to account. So I also discovered that the union last year took in $60 million in fees through nurses' dues, but they took $100 million from the government. Now, the whole function of the union is to hold the government accountable. How can that happen if a union is taking more money from the government than it is from its own nurses? So we have lots of little incestuous involvements that are making it very difficult for us as union members to get fair representation. So they have chosen a good arbitrator. We're not convinced that the legal firm that is hired for this, which is actually the CEO, Jim Gould, is a lawyer, and it's his firm. He's still a partner of this firm that is retained by the union.
There's conflict of interest. We've seen this. This is just the Canadian way, it seems. Like it's not a big enough country. There's not enough people that work in different fields that you could just like find different organizations. No, it's unreal. We just see this from Ottawa all the way down to provincial level.
You've got it. So, we've got the CEO who is billing the union for all this legal work at $600 an hour, billed in 6-minute increments. We have this delay in actually moving forward our complaints. We even offered, and we said, hey, do you guys need help with anything to do with this arbitration? Because frankly, we seem to be doing a better job of representing ourselves than you are. So they're like, sure. Do you think you could get us all the latest studies on vaccine mask efficacy and, any latest arbitration results? And I'm like, yeah, we could do that. Any chance that you guys would like pay us for doing your work? It's
right.
like, oh no, we wouldn't do that. However, we have been sending them lots of credible documentation, and Dr. Steve Pelech, I don't know if you know of him.
No,
he's
not
a UBC neuroscientist. He's a professor there, and he has been very involved in doing studies and has spoken on behalf of other arbitrations for other unions and for the Vancouver City Police. In fact, he was one of the expert witnesses involved in the discussions that allowed the Vancouver City Police to not have to be mandated. So we've been in contact. He's offered his services. And so we are like providing them these gifts of expert testimony and resources. And so we're going to see how good of a job they can pull off, because we're not feeling totally confident. In the meantime, I would have to just let you know that there is a long moving train going across the Alberta border full of healthcare workers. Everyone is leaving the province because they cannot work here, and Danielle Smith has open arms for receiving them. Also, this whole implementation of the Healthcare Professions Act has created a very threatening environment for healthcare professionals. So anyone who's aware of the imposition now of the government overseeing all of the healthcare colleges and bodies and regulations, needs to be aware of the increased punitive measures in terms of fines and jail time that will be imposed if you do not comply with what the government tells you that you have to do in your practice. Mm-hmm. So it's becoming a very threatening environment. Now, there's a couple of other things that I came across in the last year. So I have not gotten another job because this really took most of my time just to get all the documents together for the nurses and to get that process going. This last year, now I've expanded. It seems like I've honestly become this full-time revolutionist, and this was not on my radar that this is what my life would be like. But these are some of the things that I've had to deal with. So a nurse that's still working sent me an email from Interior Health. It came out mid-May, and it was by Susan Brown, the CEO of Interior Health. And so she was sending out this blurb to all of the employees saying, hey, just want you to know this great program is being rolled out through the provincial government. Have you come across PETA, the Public Interest Disclosure Act? Have you heard anything about that?
No, I don't think I have.
So this is a program that was rolled out in 2019, and it is to cover all government sectors, public service employees. And every 6 months, they expand the jurisdiction of it to cover another sector. So as of June 1st, now this whole act also applied to health authorities. So the point of this act is that they are creating this protective mechanism that if any employee or former employee wants to report any kind of wrongdoing in terms of danger or injury to patients, if there's been misuse of funds, if there's been any kind of activity that's happened in the health authority that is considered a wrongdoing, they have created this whole protective mechanism for these whistleblowers so that if you report it, it's going to now be investigated by this PETA department, which is under the umbrella of the ombudsperson. So the whole point of this is because they want the public to feel safe and know that they're protected, and they want whistleblowers to also know that they're not going to suffer repercussions because they're reporting their employee or their employer. So sounds great, right?
There's a danger to that. I mean, I just see the danger that if people can anonymously make reports, they can make false reports. I mean, what is there?
Well, they can, but then the PETA department investigates it, right? So if there's something that is not accurate, they should have the capacity to find that. But I phoned the ombudsperson office because last July I submitted a 300-page complaint against the health authorities to the ombudsperson. And in that complaint, I said the health authorities were the ones who made the decisions to terminate staff. And then from there, you have all these newspaper articles and statements from Dix and all the increased risk to the public because they can't get healthcare. I had internal email documents from Interior Health stating that they were going to have to cut services because they didn't have the staff to cover this, of all the sick time that was being called in by their double vaccinated staff. It was full of internal documentation. So I phoned the ombudsperson's office. This was just a month ago. And I said, okay, just wondering where my complaint is. And it's still sitting on the person's desk of which it landed on last July. So I said, okay, can you transfer me over to this PETA department? I'd like to talk to them because it seems like it would be something that's under their jurisdiction. So I have this long conversation with the officer. Does this particular complaint actually comply to their criteria? Is this going to be something that fits all their guidelines? And then I waited till the end of the conversation before I asked, so can you tell me how you guys actually enforce your determinations? She said, oh, Well, that's actually a really interesting question because we can't. And I said, so let me get this straight. You've created this whole act for whistleblowers to report things that are wrongdoings, potential misuse, abuse, injury. You're telling them that they will be protected. There's no repercussions. You're going to investigate. You're going to create a report. You're going to provide recommendations, but nobody has to do what you say. And she said, that's correct.
So they have no teeth on their decisions. Even they make an.
There's nothing.
What's the point?
And
It's
this
a,
is
it's just
actually
a invalid or just a useless waste of money in a bureaucracy that if they can't do anything about anything.
This is not uncommon. You will actually find that many of these tribunals have no power to enact their recommendations.
I'm learning too much about this in the past few years here. I almost said 5 years. I've been at this for a year and a half. So, I mean, I knew that our government was pretty corrupt, but I mean, we just learned that Trudeau added nearly 100,000 bureaucrats since 2015 in the federal government, and like we have more in the provinces, we have more everywhere, and they're just jobs, making up jobs that don't do anything. And to hear this, okay, we got another tribunal. We need to get away from tribunals. I'm really, really distraught on the fact that tribunals keep coming up because they say that the courts are too busy. No, train more judges, appoint more judges. There are plenty of lawyers out there that you could appoint as judges, and have them go through real courts. Because these tribunals are they're removing people's rights. They're not, and when they do have teeth, they're horrible. They're absolutely arbitrary in nature, especially in their decision making. And then it's not precedence setting. They're not doing anything like a court where you could say, oh, there's the predictability of like what this case went. This went this way, so we can say argue based on the merits of that case. No, it's willy-nilly, however it goes, case by case. It really is disgusting what's going on in all of this. We need to go back to a system where it's the courts that make these decisions and not kicked off to tribunals.
Well, and going back to the union situation, so actually any collective agreement that they come up with between the employer and the union is still superseded by the Employment Act, by the employment standards, by the law. So really, there's no use for this collective agreement. The law is already established, and the whole point of the union is to actually just enforce that law. But they're not. In the meantime, they're running $500 million in assets, over 450,000 worth that they can't seem to account for what they're doing with it. And there's absolutely no legal responsibility for them to disclose that to their members. So it's the systems that have been put in place are definitely ones that give you the illusion of protection, but there's nothing of substance. Now, another thing I was going to tell you about was the BC Assessment Authority. Okay. Because I have been dealing with challenging the value of a property that I have. So the system is that once you get your assessment in January, then you can phone into your local office to talk about it and see if there's some way that they will negotiate with you a different value. Then you end up, if you don't like that, if it rules against you, you need to appeal to this provincial tribunal level. So they'll schedule a mediation call first. And then from there, you have to do a written submission if you still can't come to an agreement. So the rules with property valuations are that the property is valued as per the market conditions of July. So whatever real estate is selling for in that time frame of July, and then the condition of the property as of October. So if you happen to be building a house, you know, they want it further on in the construction so that they can value you higher on that. So this is what I ran into both times. So I've done this twice, 2 years in a row. Both times, the first 3-panel party just said no right off the bat. I just went through another mediation. And so in the mediation was the tribunal person and 2 assessment authority people. Now, in this tribunal part, you have to submit a written document that substantiates your claim as to why you think your property is worth a certain value. They will only take listings of comparable sales from that time frame. Now, the government has access to all of that. You as a public citizen are given no tools at all to access this. I happen to have a real estate son who gave me all of the comparative listings for what I needed for that time frame, and I was able to submit my argument. When I finished my statement, the assessment authority's position was, well, I can rebut that, I can rebut that. No, we can argue that. At which point I got a little angry because the whole purpose of this process is for the public to come and get a fair evaluation of what they think their property is worth. And then when the government guys are coming in with the attitude that it doesn't matter what you bring, we're going to rebut it and hold our position. And at the same time, we have all the tools to go through this process, and there's nothing available to the public in order to provide the documentation that they're requiring. So in my case, my property last year, the assessment authority arbitrarily decided it was worth 70% more than the previous year, when all the local neighborhood went up 23. There was no justification for it. But that value put me into a place where my taxes went from $5,400 to $9,400, and it took away my right to a homeowner grant. I went through the whole process of hiring an appraiser. I had a formal appraisal. When it went to the written tribunal, they refused to accept it. So I've gone through this process a couple of times now, and I just want the public to be aware of how this is getting structured now. They can arbitrarily decide what your property is worth. They then have all the tools to say that based on our comparatives, this is what your property is worth. And you, as the public, don't have access to any of that material to be able to protect yourself. Then when you actually use tools like a formal appraisal that should have some weight, they just say no. And the only avenue you have left as a private citizen is to take it to court. But they make sure that you know that if it's ruled against you, you're also going to be responsible for the court costs of the assessment authority. And at the same time, the civic service servants have been given greater immunity. So if they don't do well in their job performance, there is no repercussions.
So they can just drag you through the court system regardless. They don't care.
It's more about that they have been given unprecedented power to determine what your property is worth. Your taxation is based on that. And the process that is in place for you to be able to get a fair hearing and protection doesn't work. So I'm just going to put that one out there.
Yeah, that's incredible.
These are all practical things that the public needs to be aware. This is going to impact every single person. You know, it's one thing for me as a nurse, okay, whatever, but I am discovering things that are now becoming problematic for all of us. The last one I'll talk about, I'll go through this one. Okay. And then you can, you know, jump in and talk about whatever you want.
Yeah, I'm like writing things down now at this point, so I can just bring it back up. Yeah.
So because of my journey through understanding what was going on with the union and the province, this started leading me down through networks throughout the province of people who are actively examining things that are going on with the law, with healthcare, with the political situation. And as a result, I ended up getting more involved with my local community, who has started to keep an eye on what's going on with our regional district, our local government.
Okay.
Now, I didn't know this, and probably most people don't know this, that the regional district is actually the overarching umbrella for every municipality. So cities, towns, villages, and the areas around it all are under the regional district umbrella.
Okay.
So cities don't have authority over the regional district. They are still an entity under the regional district umbrella.
Good to know.
The province of BC has now introduced this Climate Action 2030 agenda. Now, have you come across this?
The specific one to British Columbia, I'm not familiar with the ins and outs of this one, no.
Okay. Most people aren't. And in most regional districts, this has already been passed. In our regional district of Central Kootenay, so around the Nelson area, we discovered in April that the board of directors, so these regional districts have the regional district administration staff that work at the regional district. And then every 3 years, there's an elected board of directors. So a representative from every area, city, municipality comes to the table. So in our case, there's 20 of them. We discovered that in April, they were going to vote and pass this climate action plan. But we were lucky in that people had already been going through this document and had massive concerns about what this agenda is that the province is planning. We had like 50 people show up at the meeting and told the regional district that there had been no public consultation and they had no business passing this through until the public had been at least aware of what the repercussions of this were. As a result, they did delay the vote. They arranged town halls all through our area and subsequently canceled them because we were accused of being an angry mob, even though we were all present at the meeting and it was videotaped. Everybody was respectful. There was like no reason to follow that course. As a result, community members all around this area were so concerned about this issue that we have been having our own town halls. So currently we've already had, I think, 10 of them all over this area. Like, you know, it's like 5 hours driving across. So in 10 different communities, this has all been citizen organized. So let me tell you some of the issues that are in this plan.
Okay.
By 2030, the provincial government is mandating that 90% of gas-powered vehicles will no longer be manufactured. So the whole point is that we have to lower our carbon emissions. Now, I'm not going to get into, is this real or not, the emergency about the climate action. I'm just going to let people know what the plan is for the implementation of what they're planning, because this is important.
Sure.
Okay. So now the production of gas-powered anything is going down by 90%, which means then the only way that you can replace, say, vehicles is by producing more electric vehicles. Now, I went and talked to the local Toyota dealership because I wanted to know, okay, from the auto sector, what is your guys's perspective about this? And so the operations manager said,
"You're talking to the right guy."
Look at our car lot. We have no new vehicles here, and we haven't for a long time. And so he said, you need to go and look up the press release that came from our CEO of Toyota Canada.
I do know this.
So Mr. Hutchinson.
Yeah.
So I looked at the press release. I looked at, he's been going all across Canada, stopping in the different provinces, telling everybody that the federal government has legislated them to focus on zero emissions electric vehicles, which is the 100% electric vehicle.
That's right.
The resources that it's taking to build one vehicle is equivalent to what they could build 90 hybrids with. So now he's saying a hybrid has around an 80-kilometer range that people can use on battery, which generally would get them back and forth to work, all their zipping around town, and they would be operating on their battery. But they can't make these 90 vehicles because they're being legislated to make the 100% electric vehicle. And he said, this plan is not viable.
Nope.
There is no way that we can have the mining materials to create the batteries that are going to be needed to replace all these gas-powered vehicles. It's not even something that is doable. In the same time, I actually have a contact who's high up in BC Hydro. And I said, okay, has the government actually done any kind of investigation, analysis as to the ability to provide the electricity requirements that will be needed by 2030 with this switch of reducing all this gas-powered stuff to electric? And it's not just vehicles. They want to take out gas furnaces, gas stoves, gas fireplaces, anything that is fossil fuel. So he told me, no, we do not have this report. It would be something that the government would provide. He said, but just so you know, the Site C dam has taken 7 years to build, and it's added in 20% more electricity into the grid into BC. But in our peak times, we are still having to purchase power from the States and from Alberta. Mm-hmm. And often that electricity is powered by coal.
Yes, because we're not allowed to produce energy by coal. Thank you, John Horgan. He was, well, that wasn't his fault. He's the reason why we don't have the LNG pipeline from Alberta going to wood fiber in British Columbia. That's his thing. But we, he's on the coal board now. After yes. that what a trip that is. Like he single-handedly stopped the LNG pipeline. Well, I mean, with his party, but then as soon as he retired, he comes forward. He's supposed to be the environmental guy, and he's on the coal board. It's like he did it all for the coal industry. It's ridiculous. And then we sell our coal to the United States because there's a ban on making coal energy in British Columbia or in Canada. So we have to sell our coal to the Americans so that they can fire up a plant and sell us back our electricity. It's ridiculous. Yes. It's ludicrous what we're doing.
Yeah. So then I was talking with John Rustad. He came out for a tour here. Now he was an MLA. He's from around the, I can't say the riding. It's a First Nations term, I think, but it's close to Prince George anyway. He actually was with the BC Liberal, then BC United Party. But because he retweeted a statement from a Greenpeace dude who was talking about the fact that I think it had something to do with, the trees are basically filtering all our carbon anyway.
Yeah.
Because he retweeted that, he got kicked out of the Liberal Party. And so as a result, he is now trying to recreate the BC Conservative Party, which has been inactive, hasn't really been used for, I don't know, a couple of decades. And so he's running now on this, these values of he's fought for terminated workers to be brought back. He's fighting that this climate action business is just, it's not the emergency that they're making out, and the solutions that the government is providing are it's not really solutions.
Yeah, I agree with that.
In discussing with him, he had done analysis, and so from what their provincial government has formulated is that in order for us to meet the electricity demand that is going to occur by 2030 because of this reduction of gas-powered stuff, we would need 20 more Site C dams to fill that need.
Yep.
And he said, at this point in time, it's not even on the table until 2028 to discuss building another dam, and it takes another 10 years after that.
They're not serious. These people are not serious. They really are not.
So what we have is we have this climate action plan being introduced to the public under the guise of we're in an emergency, and we all need to know that Canada is responsible for 1.6% of the worldwide problem, 1.6, and of that 1.6, 9% of the problem is organic waste material decomposing. And so the result of that to save the planet is that in order to incentivize the public to start taking responsibility for the planet, the most effective thing the government can do is to increase the carbon tax. So currently we're paying $45 a ton. It's going to go up to $176 a ton. Mm-hmm. So the amount of tax that is going to be included on every single thing that you purchase or fill your tank with or heat your house with is going to be impossible for the average person to be able to afford. So one, we have taxation. Two, we have there is no infrastructure to accommodate this. And that almost looks like it's intentional at the same time that they're going to make sure that there is no vehicles available. So now we're running into an issue of people in rural areas will not be able to survive without vehicles. So you start to see, okay, these solutions that they're proposing actually don't contribute anything to fixing our atmosphere because we're actually not in danger zones at all. But they are deliberately setting up an environment where how are we going to survive? Because they said also that not only will that carbon tax be applied to us, but anything coming across the border will also have that tax attached to keep it fair. So we have been doing these community meetings all over these town halls and just organizing it ourselves and basically putting the mic out and letting people talk. Where we don't care who wants to talk. You get your 3 minutes. Everybody's been reasonable. Everyone has been very intelligent. I'm finding that a lot of the general population, many are actually doing their homework and they're asking legitimate questions. Mm-hmm. But what we're finding out is that, for instance, at our regional district, 5 years ago, there was 225 employees. Now there's over 530. They've doubled the employees in 5 years. They've increased all these services, which are wasting our money on things that don't actually accomplish anything, at the same time as creating even more restrictions that impose a lack of freedom and democracy on us. So I'll stop there, but I just wanted you to know that the path that I've been on has just been one of, I feel like I'm in a House of Cards Netflix show BC version, because the amount of abuse that is happening to private citizens in this province is spectacular. So there you go. There's my story. Now, what do you want to talk about?
Okay, I want to talk about a bunch of this stuff, but I'm gonna go on the last topic first, because you say a House of Cards or Netflix series. Have you seen the movie Idiocracy? It's an older one. It's a really good movie. It's a comedy. This guy goes into a cryogenic thing, falls asleep, wakes up 500 years later, and everybody's stupid. And and
Okay.
and it's a great premise for a story. But they have this big problem. They're all idiots, right? They're all idiots. And he comes out with his 20th century smarts, which is just average, right? He's just an average guy. But they have this big problem with the dust bowl. They have this huge dust bowl because their crops won't grow, and they're having a real crisis, and they can't figure it out. And he fumbles on the reason why is because they're feeding the plants Gatorade. Because they thought, well, Gatorade has electrolytes. It's what your body craves. It's the slogan or whatever, right? And so, like, people are just idiotic, right? And this is where we are with this whole climate agenda thing. There are technologies out there that could alleviate the problem that's being told that is being perceived that we have. There are technologies. Bjorn Lomborg is fantastic for this. He comes from the assumption that climate change is anthropomorphic and it is happening. Maybe that there's not quite the catastrophe that's being told, but we should clean up our act, he says, right? At that length, he says there are a number of technologies that other countries are implementing that we could absolutely implement here. And stop pretending with our recycling, instead of shipping recyclings all the way across the Pacific to the Pacific Southwest or the Asian nations. We could actually just incinerate garbage here, produce energy, and it would come out cleaner. And we would actually use less energy and come out net positive by just incinerating garbage. It's what countries in Europe have been doing. Japan's been doing it for decades. It's clean, it's effective, and it takes care of that problem. There's a number of other issues, but it's funny because you bring up the 16% or the 1.6%. Canada is 1.6% contributor of carbon dioxide, which is we're being told is the issue. And what are you doing, son? My son came in. He just wants to jump in here. Daniel.
Hey, buddy.
Okay, I gotta lock that door. You okay? Pick me a winner. Get out of here. Go on. Off you go. Off you go. Okay, so the 1.6 percent of CO2 emitted in the world is Canada. 30% is China. We are not saying a thing about China. Why is it that we're selling them a bunch of coal? If this is the British Columbia government that's saying this. We actively put a stop on LNG from Alberta, like the natural gas that was coming, the pipeline, and then going to Woodfibre, British Columbia, to be refrigerated and then put on barges so we could ship it to China so that they could be cleaner, mind you. Natural gas is a viable alternative to coal energy, which is a majority of what they're burning. We could be selling that to them. No, we didn't because of what? Nepotism, of corruption. The guy who was the premier was too close to the coal industry and didn't want his buddy's industry, his friends, to lose out on the profits that they were making there. Well, this is really...
Why? You're sounding like a climate denier.
Okay. No, and this is an interesting thing. I started off the show before you joined in. I was talking about environmentalism, and I'm actually very passionate about environmentalism. This is a thing. I'm concerned about the environment. There's climate catastrophism, and I don't subscribe to that. I don't believe that CO2 may or may not have an effect, blah, blah, blah. We could get into that all day long. But I'm concerned about the environment. We're polluting our actual environment. And we need to do something about that. Why are we concerning ourselves with a catastrophe way down the road that may or may not happen? This is...
So you do need to be aware that in most areas around BC, they are implementing this agenda. Mm-hmm. Now, I'll just say we've got a website going, kootenaitribe.ca, mm-hmm. kootenaitribe.ca. It's volunteer, like, don't be hard on us, but on it we have a couple videos if people are interested, on presentations from people that are collecting documentation and evidence around BC and have made a couple video presentations. If you're interested in They provide all the government links and, you know, just some of the higher up that's sort of dictating how this is going and what you can expect in terms of what could be rolled out, because the average person in this province has no idea what the plan is and how it's going to be implemented, and the significant repercussions that we are going to face under the guise of them helping keep us safe and saving the planet. And when you actually ask intelligent questions, they don't have answers. And the response is, you're an angry mob and you're a climate denier.
No,
So it's retarded. And it sounds so much like the pandemic, right?
Yes, it really is.
You're just anti-vaxxer, you know, like you have no intelligent discourse here. And so, however, I do see a change in the climate of the public now, in that because of that first experience, like when I asked you at the beginning, what characteristic do you see in yourself now? What I'm seeing is all across our community, people have risen up, that this pandemic issue brought them to a place where they had to finally know their own opinion and understand to what degree they were willing to act that out, and what things like integrity and ethics really meant in terms of your own person and allowing other people to coerce you. Now, you were talking about the movie and the stupid people. This is kind of what I see. So more and more people are being hired by the government. So it's healthcare, other sectors. You know, there's a high percentage of government workers. And when you become a government worker, and I discovered this when I became a nurse, which was after the age of 50. Before that, I was self-employed. I ran food businesses and construction and all different things. I made the decisions. For any problem, I found a solution and I took care of it. When I started working for the health authority, this is what happens. You are told how to think. You are told how to speak. You are told how to do your job. You are told how the garbage has to be put away.
For a lot of people, that's an easy way to navigate life, though. Like, a lot of people like that. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, but what I discovered is that initially people will come into that environment and they will see a solution to a problem that makes better sense, and they suggest it. And then over time, it's just consistently reinforced over and over that your opinion does not matter. It does not matter that you actually have a better idea. We are the ones who are making the decisions. And so what I saw was good people who were intelligent over time gave up. And so now you've got this combination of people who do want to be told what to do, as well as the ones who have been beaten down.
Yeah.
And now we have a society that is trained to do as they're told. So how do we, I'm curious, I actually wanted to ask you this question. How do we navigate this? Because it isn't something new. I think I mentioned before, like in the area that I'm living in, my husband, his family was interned in the internment camps when the Japanese were, rounded up and all their assets taken. And then they were put in these internment camps. And then following that, the Doukhobor community out here, because they wouldn't put their children in public school, their children were taken, and then they were put in this same internment area in this children's home. So this went on, I think, for 10 years, where the kids were allowed to see their parents once a week through a fence on Sunday afternoon for an hour. Now, what I found interesting about this was that in that 10 years, even though there's no army or guards, or nobody went up to that building and said, open the doors, let the kids out, we're taking them home. Nobody ever did that.
That's insane.
So when you look at humans, and we're in a different storyline than what happened with the Japanese and the Duke of Boer, but we're also seeing the same human response. Do you think it's possible that we can become something different?
Can you explain to me who are the Duke of War?
Okay, so the Duke of Boer were Russians that were pacifist. So the Duke of Boer was like a religious sect of Russians who refused to go to war. They burned their guns. And so as a result, they were persecuted. They had their farms taken away from them. They refused to do what the Russian government told them to do. As a result, there was an opportunity for them to come to Canada. And so they initially settled in Saskatchewan and made communities, but then the government reneged on allowing them to have the land, and they ended up coming out to this area around the Grand Forks Castlegar area and set up settlements for their communities. They just wanted to live in peace. But because they had come from a country where the government had been so abusive to them, they came and they were suspicious. They did not want their children going to public school because they hadn't created trust levels for this country yet.
Yeah, I can understand that.
With due process, because they ended up coming in and taking their children.
I've never even heard that. That is insane. I didn't even know that existed in Canadian history.
Now, I know they seem to not want to bring that up in our public education.
No, I mean, we're kind of going all over the place here, and I wanted to stick kind of a bit to this 2030
energy thing?
Yeah, 2030 agenda for a bit. So the 2030 agenda in British Columbia is basically the California version of the 2030 agenda in the United States. They want to accelerate things. They want to go right hard to 90% of all vehicles is that what you said?
Yeah. And by 2035, gas-powered vehicles will be illegal to manufacture.
Outlawed.
Yeah. So you'll still be able to get used ones, just that there'll be no more manufacturing of
That's still the agenda for all of Canada, by the way. 2035 is all vehicles apart from electric. And this is where I've raised my concerns about this, because what if another technology comes about? The foresight's not very good here. What if another technology came about that's not electric cars? They specifically say electric cars. They have to be electric cars in the legislation, instead of saying they have to be zero emission vehicles or what have you. And they give no exceptions. No exceptions. Like, what if you live in an area where batteries don't function? Like cold areas, all throughout middle Canada. It just does not work. But in British Columbia, this is a thing. Daniel, you gotta get out of here. Sorry. I gotta, bear with me 1 second.
Yeah.
Let you go. Let you go. I left my door unlocked. It's just, it happens sometimes. Apologies everybody. Okay, so the 2030 agenda is across Canada. It actually is going to start in 2025. A lot of people don't realize this. 2025 is 20% of all vehicles sold in Canada have to be zero emissions, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. 20% from every manufacturer. Now, immediately, this is going to create a massive issue in the automotive sector. Massive issue. Because across Canada, the sales have to be 20% electric. Now, in the first few years, that might be like okay for them to try to pull off, but nowhere are they hitting targets like that. Nowhere. And the issue with Toyota is they've just outright refused to make those vehicles. The CEO just came out and said, we're not doing it. Sorry, not doing it.
Oh, that was just recent?
Oh yeah. He he said we're not making we're not making all electric vehicle. We'll make hybrids and that's economical. It makes sense. And, you know, all countries around the world are happy to get it, but whatever. We're not doing all EV, which might be troublesome for them with this Canadian legislation. It may just remove our ability to get Toyotas entirely from Canada. Don't know. We'll see how that plays out. But this might be like another battle like Google and Meta with Bill C-18 with the federal government, where they're just like, okay, we're just going to pull our product. You can't have it. So then moving forward, we're gonna have what happens here is a shortage. Whenever the government comes in and says we're gonna make an artificial arbitrary shortage on any product, what ends up happening is they create shortages in other places. If a company can't get all the materials enough to make enough electric cars, what it does is it limits their ability to sell the other cars in Canada starting in 2025. This is only a couple of years away. So what happens there? It shoots up the price of automobiles because old clunkers are still breaking down and need to be replaced. So people that would normally be in the market to buy a new vehicle will now be in the market to buy a used vehicle because they won't be available, period. And then the used market's going to shoot up like crazy and people will be repairing. I mean, it's going to be a boon for me. It's going to be great for me because the repair industry is going to be booming. And you know what? We don't have enough technicians and we can't even import them. But this is the reality of the situation. This is absolutely the reality of the situation. They're creating a situation where it's just going to create shortages, just like communism, right? Communism was a big issue. They had no foresight. They just say, we're going to have a central authority that's going to look over the agricultural industry. You know, Mao, Stalin, Lenin, all these people. We got such a great idea because what do we got? We've got force. We've got the state that's going to enforce this. That's all they've got. And what do? They just destroy economies, absolutely destroy economies with their lack of sense in the scenario. When we could look at things and we could look at our pollution issue, because I believe pollution is a real issue. And yes, we should be looking to cleaning up our act when it comes to our waterways, industry, air quality, all of this stuff. And in Canada is actually a trendsetter in this direction. We are some of the best in the world for air care, air quality, waterways, getting things going. So we should be moving forward for drinking water and all these things that have always been promises by the Liberal government. But we're not going in that direction, and we're being absolute hypocrites on a global scale, because we're saying CO2 is the issue and we're selling our coal to the United States to produce our energy because we have energy shortages. This is it's nonsense, and we need some change. We need some change, realistic stuff. I don't know if you were listening early in the podcast, but some of us in our community came up with this. It's kind of a dastardly little idea, and I think it might actually work. So a lot of environmentalists that are into the climate thing, they've left, and they're all focused in the Liberal Party in Canada. That's their big focus. Now, a lot of people who are really concerned about the environment, they really don't have a real place to go. And some of us got talking in the community. We said, what if we took over the environmental movement with a real environmental movement? People who are actually concerned about the environment and these good ideas that are coming from like Sweden, Laurenburg, from Japan with all of that stuff. Why don't we start our own environmental movement? Nah, in fact, why don't we take over the current environmental movement? Why don't we just take it? Because it's up for grabs and everybody's concerned about climate catastrophe. Nobody is serious in the Green Party Why don't we all just become members and we'll have our party?
So party as in a political party, or what do you mean a party? You just want to actually...
Yeah, just disrupt it. Just disrupt it with real ideas. So just jump in. If we could get, say, the Green Party, which has standing to be in debates in Canada, because other...
okay, let me tell you something I discovered here.
Okay.
So we discovered a document that was the West Kootenay Eco Society, who have been a society formed here for environmental issues. I think they were fighting for Jumbo originally, but anyway, they get all this grant money, okay? We discovered that it was them who came up with this West Kootenay 100% renewable plan that they submitted to the regional district. Now, this society currently has, it looks like 3 people over the age of 25. There's 13 of them on the board. 10 of them look like they just got out of university.
Mm-hmm.
They created this document from taxpayer money that went to the regional district, where they said, we're trying to save the environment. You need to pass our plan here. And so the board voted on it and put it through. This plan, these people were the ones who actually contributed and created this Clean BC 2023 agenda, which is now being circulated all through the province as to what our plan is for the future. This 100% renewable plan, they state in their website that they have made this agreement with 250 cities worldwide, 18 of which are in Canada, 13 of which are in our regional district. How did this small group of people have the capacity to influence the plan that all of us in the province are going to have to adhere to, without being elected, without the public being consulted, without any input from anyone? So, I mean, if you have the capacity to have a group that can actually pull off some documents and take it to your regional district and say, hey, you need to like pass this through, they will.
Well, so here's the thing.
You all have to do what you want.
I think they're coming with the right words at the right time is what they're doing. Is they come in and the politicians are like, okay, climate stuff, cool, we're on board. What I'm
you guys come up with the solutions and we'll follow it.
Yeah, what I'm suggesting is that we come in and instead of doing the climate thing, take back the environmental movement. Come in and say. Yes. We're not, our big concern isn't climate, it's the environment. Because here's the thing, you'll get a lot of support from people, because if you come forward with the climate stuff, people are like, yeah, okay, whatever. But if you come forward with environmentalism and real stuff, they feel good to get involved with it, and they don't fear social ostracism over it. Because I'm supporting an environmental cause. But what you could do is you come in, and if enough of us, because like I said, the Green Party's just all but abandoned what it is that they're doing, and there's not enough support for them anyway. But if enough of us become members of the Green Party, we could actually affect the change in the leadership. And
you might want to check out this BC Conservative Party, because there was actually a lot of his values.
Oh, I'm not talking
align with what we're saying.
So I'm not talking about trying to get them elected. I'm just talking about changing them fundamentally.
Yes.
But
that's what's going on with this new BC Conservative Party, because it's brand new. He is looking for candidates in every single riding. Now, if you have people that are committed to, I mean, one thing I've been pushing this group is you really have to raise the quality of candidate that you're bringing in here.
Absolutely.
Like we're done with high school popularity contests. Like there has to be a level of education where people can actually read legal documents and understand what they're saying. They should be able to read financial statements. They should have this kind of understanding that you're talking about when it comes to the environment and possible solutions. And so if there was those kinds of people that because part of my distress is that this whole healthcare fiasco thing is one element of the problem that our NDP government is systematically killing us.
Yeah.
And if we have one more election with them and the Liberals have bought into the same BS, if we have another round of these two parties in control, there is no hope for us. I absolutely fundamentally believe that there is no hope for us. This new BC Conservative Party, I'm hoping to God they can pull it together. You know, this is just new. They've got their kind of board going. They're just getting started. But the fact is, every single riding is looking for somebody to run as a candidate, where this potentially could be a solution, because they are on this same position that you are in terms of solutions for the environment that are realistic, that we need to use this other technology. We can't be shutting down the LNG stuff.
Yeah.
We have to be getting healthcare workers back. We have to be getting rid of this carbon tax stuff. Like it's all a platform that we're in agreement with. And it really is, can I say, right for the taking for the people who have the kind of integrity and thinking that you have. So I'm just going to leave it there, because we have to find something on a provincial level that we can utilize. And I don't know what that solution is yet. This is the only one that's come up that I think has the potential, but we have to be realistic in that if we don't find a solution on a provincial level, we're just going to be playing whack-a-mole and it's over.
Yeah. Well, if you look at Alberta, they've taken charge on their provincial level, and that's what we need to see here. I'm really hoping to get some of the conservatives from BC on the channel so they can get more information out about their platform. I've spoken with Aaron Gunn. I know he's been speaking with them. I had him on the channel. He just released a really, really good documentary. I don't know if you watched it. He released a few of them. One is Canada is Dying, about a subject that we're not allowed to talk about on YouTube because you'll get restricted. I don't know why it's such a taboo one on YouTube. It's worse than COVID, actually. And that's the DRUGS problem in Canada. And for some reason, you're not allowed to speak about it. And all my time on YouTube, that's the most severe stuff that I've had was with that. But he's been going hard on that. And also, he just released one a few days ago. I'm going to have him on the channel this coming week to talk about it. But he released a documentary talking about the history of this issue with the West versus the East in Canada and Confederation, and how it's laid out, and the reason why we keep getting hooped on all these deals at a federal level. And I know he has more coming for provincial stuff. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about that stuff. But yeah, there's lots of good ideas, and I'm actively trying to do like the culture war thing. So I think if we can subvert some things with the culture war, that's a plan going forward. But I wanted to talk to you about Bill 36, because this is a part of what you were talking about earlier with, well, for one, the nurses unions, but then the nursing trade as a whole. You obviously, everyone who is a nurse is part of the nurse. It's the nurses licensing board. So these
colleges,
the colleges. So
the college nurses,
So these have been amalgamated with this new bill. And from my understanding, it's a big amalgamation.
It'll take effect in a year.
Oh, so it hasn't taken effect yet.
That's right.
Okay.
The legislature is in place. but all of the work now needs to happen in getting all of these institutions, streamed down and different personnel in place. And so they're saying it should be operational between April and June of next year.
Okay. Now, there's a lot involved in Bill 36, and this is in British Columbia, and I think this is a litmus test for the rest of the provinces to be paying very close attention, because this is, I've noticed bills like this, they'll pass in one province, and then it seems to be like a domino effect. They try to bring this everywhere else as it's been happening. So Bill C-36 amalgamates all the colleges down from I think it was 24 to 12. And is that correct?
Actually from 16 to 6.
Oh, okay.
And it's Bill 36. The C ones are federal.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry about that.
Bill 36, that's fine. And it's now considered the Healthcare Professions Act. So it's now law. So the bill is over. It's now the law, Healthcare Professions Act.
Okay, the Healthcare Professions Act. And it's amalgamated a bunch of the colleges. Mm-hmm. And from what I understand, it also removes the professional aspect of the colleges. Not only that, but the democratization of the colleges. They're now, the members of the boards don't necessarily have to be practitioners of the space, and they will be government officials appointed instead of elected officials as an independent body. Am I correct on that?
You're correct. And Adrian Dix stated that it was for the purpose of standardizing discipline.
Okay, so this gets us into the disciplinary thing of this. So from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, the bill introduces a way that people can anonymously complain about a doctor and have disciplinary action be taken on them without them being able to ever face their accuser. Is that wrong, or am I right about that?
And as well, yeah, they don't have to have any kind of warrant to come onto your property and confiscate records, patient records. So this is now actually, I should put you in contact with a registered clinical counselor that I am connected with here. So counselors are not under a college, and now they will be forced to be.
Oh, okay.
So now this is new territory, because not only are they now going to be under the jurisdiction of this Healthcare Professions Act, there is also all sorts of federal legislation coming down in terms of all of this inclusivity stuff.
Really?
So they are not allowed now. If you're having a counseling session with a client, you cannot refer to them by their pronouns. Even if they say it's fine, I'm a girl, I'm a she, you can't. You have to use they.
You have to use they, them pronouns for everybody?
Yes, it's gotten infiltrated all through that profession. There's also issues with, because of the law. She gave me an example where a mother came to a counselor for counseling because her 12-year-old daughter had decided that she wanted to be transgender. And so the mother came to the counselor saying, I just want to get her through her puberty without her taking anything. You know, I want to be understanding, but I want to do whatever I can to make sure that she doesn't do permanent damage before she understands the consequences of that. Mm-hmm. So now with these new laws, both provincially and federally, this counselor actually went and talked to a lawyer because she was like, what now are these new dynamics that I have to operate within? And the lawyer said to her, you are obligated to report this mom to Children and Family Services.
This is a Children
She
and Family
is,
Services matter if
yes,
a parent is
yes, because
concerned.
she's not supporting the transgender thing. And now the counselor has an obligation to report the parent, even though this previously was a client counselor privilege, confidentiality. Now there is nothing. The government can go in and seize all those records. Anything that's said in private is can be seized without a warrant. Like the privacy issues, the threat that any professional is under in complying to whatever rule the government says that they have to comply to has infiltrated. It's seeping in and taking over the healthcare system with a massive, threatening, abusive role, which is none of the government's business. They don't have the training on how to deliver healthcare. They don't have any of the they just it's not there. It's overreach. They have no business being in there, but they're setting up everything so that they are now the ones determining how every single person in this province is allowed to conduct their business. And it's not just the Healthcare Professions Act. They actually did this to the trade sector too. That was passed even before the Healthcare Act. And it's looking like they're trying to take over the bar, the Law Society as well, with the same agenda.
So the trades do fall under now. It's the Industry Training Authority is federal. So we have interprovincial. It's quasi federal. They've had the Industry Training Authority, and then now it spans across Canada. That's like, so my ticket as a automotive technician is issued by the Interprovincial Industry Training Authority, minus Quebec. It's just everything's always minus Quebec, but that's how that works.
So that brings up another thing that I came across. This was another document that looked like it came from the Federal Ministry of Health. It was produced in 2019. And so I just found it a month ago, and it talks about multi-jurisdictional licenses. So currently, any healthcare provider, you have to get a separate license for every province. And this is kind of a stupid thing. Like, if you are trained in this country, you should be able to work in any province.
Yep.
But it's restricted so that they can make money off of. Anyway,
yes,
it's been coming out.
Well, I think that's important to just point out is that these restrictions, they come from trade unions, and the whole idea, and whatever unions or whatever groups that are overseeing these particular trades. Originally, the trade, like mechanics or plumbers, electricians, all of these things, the original reason for certification was to crowd out people that could come in and take your job. Like that was the whole point. It was to raise the bar, the barrier to entry, so you could charge more for your services. And now it's really become an issue because now we can't get enough people to do the jobs because nobody's willing to go through the rigmarole to get those jobs, because everybody wants to be someone who works for Google or whatever, right?
But I'm going to bring up one thing that I came across that was the concern. So,
okay.
Because this came out the year before the pandemic, they're bringing out this multi-jurisdictional license, which on the surface looks like obviously this is what you would do: allow a professional to be able to work anywhere in Canada. Obvious, except I came across one part of the document where it says, if there's a reason why a healthcare professional gets terminated for misconduct in one province, that would apply to all of them. Now, in our case, nurses here were fired for misconduct. and they are able to work all across Canada. What happens now if these nurses, under this multi-jurisdictional license, this thing applies where if you've been fired in one province, that means now you can't work anywhere in Canada. So now it blocks you from not being able to work anywhere here. So that was just one thing that I picked up that I thought, oh, this is a potential problem.
Yeah, big time. So it's created another issue of people not wanting to enter the trade in the first place. People don't want to become nurses. People don't want to go to become doctors. Why would you spend all that time spending lots of money going through medical school to do all of this, only to have a job that in British Columbia, I'm sorry, doctors don't make very much. There's so much overhead. There's so much you have to pay back. And you had so much compliance that you're really not making much. Like most of them are just saying, forget it. I'm not getting into the trade, retiring early, bailing on British Columbia, bailing on Canada at all. It's not good for us. It's not good for us. We need medical professionals.
It's okay. So I'll give you an example here. The federal, I don't know if it was one of the governments, federal, provincial, offered this community here $1.5 million to replace, I don't know what the criteria was, but this is what they do. They offer grants to communities and they restrict what it can be used for. So here, they decided to change out our pier that's on the waterfront. Now they got the 1.5 million if they kicked in $2 million. The thing overran the cost. It's like well over $4 million for a pier that did not need to be replaced. However, if that money had come without restrictions, every community could build and own their own health unit building. And they could run the costs of that building themselves and hire their own employees, which means they could actually have doctors and nurses that maybe aren't vaccinated or are vaccinated or whatever. But if they are covering the costs of the building, then these professionals can afford to make a living without having to incur the worry and the hardship of having to run a business as well when you're just trying to be a healthcare professional. Mm-hmm. But all of this grant money comes with restrictions. We have a little town, Caslow, who applied for a grant because they need to do some work on their hospital. And the provincial government refused them the ability to spend the money on their hospital. It has to be used for some other capital project. So every time these grants come down from one level to the other, they come with all these restrictions. And so the community has absolutely no say on how it can take care of its own services. It's another level of bureaucracy that is, it's again, that stupid thing that you identified before.
Yeah, Idiocracy, the movie. You got to watch it now. You'll really enjoy it. It's really funny. But so one thing that it was a massive takeaway for me when I spoke with Dr. Brian Day of the Canby Surgical Clinic. And I'm hoping to have him on it again because the Supreme Court of British Columbia won't see his case. They just denied seeing his case after 12 years. So I'd like to talk to him about that. But one thing that he brought up when I was talking with him that was just such a mind-melting experience, moment, was he was telling me about how they fiscally take care of hospitals in British Columbia. The way it works. The hospital is given a lump sum amount of money for the year by the government. And then they're just told, operate. That's it. So nothing is earmarked to cases or to patients or any of this stuff. They're not given funding based on how many patients they bring in. There's no incentive to get any work done, help people, make sure that their equipment is maintained correctly. In fact, if anything, the only incentive there is to shut the door, lock it, throw away the key, and not help anybody, and just collect that grant from the government. And the more people you bring in, the more it cuts out of that dollar amount. So it's a disincentive to actually helping people in the healthcare industry. I could not believe that that's actually the way that we do things here.
Oh, and now because nurses have figured out that you can make more money with a travel agency company than being an employee, the expenditure in this area went from a travel nurse's from 1 year was $6 million for the cost. The next year it was 64 million. And when you hire a travel agency nurse, you have to pay their accommodation, their travel, they get a higher wage, and you're paying the travel agency itself. So it's 4 times the cost for a nurse versus having that nurse as an employee.
So explain that really quick. Explain that real quick. What's a a travel agency nurse?
It's a private company. So right now, you can either work at our hospital here as an employee of Interior Health, or when Interior Health doesn't have enough employees, they will contact private agencies who have their own employees and then do a contract basis to bring a travel agency nurse in to work in the hospital for a certain amount of shifts, whatever they need covered. So, but those nurses get paid more. The health authority has to cover their accommodation. It has to cover their travel and and also the fee of the agency itself. So often it's 4 times the cost to bring in an agency nurse versus an employee, but they have to do it because everyone is so short-staffed. And nurses are figuring out that it's worthwhile to work for a private agency for a few reasons. And I'll tell you what those reasons are.
You make more money.
As a private agency nurse, you do not have to be a union member, which means you're not losing 2% of your wage to the union. As well, if you have a problem in the workplace, your agency will just pull you. Where the union tells you, if you're having workplace violence, if you're being harassed, yeah, suck it up. You're just going to have to deal with it because, we can't make the employer honor their agreement. That's what they said at their big annual general meeting. Then you have flexibility in your schedule because you just take contracts and then you can not work for a while if you want. There's a lot of advantages to being an agency nurse, but these are private companies. So
just
the
one
authorities
thing.
terminate all of us and then have to bring in these expensive nurses.
Right. So I take it that the agencies won't hire you on as a unvaccinated nurse.
Well, actually, I got a call yesterday seeing if I would like a contract in, they're desperate in Saskatchewan and New Brunswick.
So you can go to other provinces,
Alberta.
just not in British Columbia.
I can go, yeah. And I said, call me in the fall. I said, right now I am like full-time employed trying to actually get nurses back to work in our province. So when I get finished with that job, call me later and maybe I'll do it then. But
well, you're not going back to the union, not after this. No way. No way. That's just ridiculous. No way. And why is everybody not just quitting the union and going and working for these nurse agencies?
The migration is happening.
Oh, it is happening. So the incentives are there. Is this? Yeah. Do you think maybe this is something they were trying to do to bust the union?
It appears to me that the unions have been powerless for a long time. We just didn't know it. They've been bought off. Also, as well, I can't figure out why there's such a push to bring in international workers. That's like a huge push. And I find that It does. I can't figure that out yet. I don't understand why they're doing that, especially when they're going on and on about the housing issue and that there's no place for people to live. Yet their solution to the problem is to bring in more international workers. So I'm still trying to figure that out.
I think I have the answer to that, and it's
Tell
not
me.
well, it's not a nice one. It's unfunded liabilities. We're gonna have what, in the next 10 years or so, we're gonna have a huge amount of Canadians retiring and collecting a pension plan that politicians have said they've been saving for, but they've been the CPP contributions go right into the main coffers. They get spent, and then they spend more money even on top of that we don't even have, and they have no money to fund those liabilities. And with a shrinking population, because that's it. We're at a what, 1.5 production rate in Canada, which it's not even a replacement. So they got to bring in people to fund these unfunded liabilities, and without that, there's not going to be that's not going to be a thing. On top of that, housing bubble, right? I don't believe that there's a housing shortage, because there's a lot of houses being propped up, built everywhere. If anything, they could get out of the way, get out of the red tape, when it comes to the building industry. A lot of these towns, it takes way too long to make a permit. You get a permit to build a house. It costs you hundreds of thousands of dollars to build a house, just in permits. Like, it's ridiculous. They could get right out of the way.
And our province now has escalated this whole Step 5 code. Are you familiar with that?
No.
So to be more energy efficient, now on top of the building code, there's this Step 5 code that they're implementing a step every year. So you're going to have to move to the highest efficiency standards for space and water heaters, for windows. There can be zero emissions. So like the cost of adding on all of these extra features is prohibitive.
Yeah.
And it does not actually give you back savings that you can see. Like, it would take at minimum 10 years for you to actually see any savings on your utilities from the initial cost that is being put out. And this is getting forced. Like, in
and
our
how do we know what
district,
savings even look like when the price of energy keeps going up, and they keep telling us what we're going to have to spend on this? But the sad part about all this is they want to bring in all these immigrants to take care of this problem with a fiscal problem. It really is just a fiscal problem, and no politician wants this to be on their watch. They just open door immigration policy for this reason, because they don't want they don't want to tell pensioners that have paid in their entire lives that they can't pay them. They can't pay them.
Yeah.
And that's coming. It's coming. It's going to be devastating for a lot of people. And
this is why I had 4 kids.
That's your pension right there. I get it. No, I absolutely get it. But and bless us. Hopefully we can have more. That's our plan. We've got 2, but that's the old school plan. That is your pension. When it comes to that. But here's the deal: they're bringing in all these foreigners who are supposed to be the next people paying into this Ponzi scheme of the Canadian pension plan. But people are not happy when they get here. Like, people are really realizing that they've been sold a bill of goods, and that Canada's not all it's cracked up to be when it comes to the ability to earn a living, the ability to build your dream home, to make the life that you want to have. And then some of them don't even realize how cold it was going to be when they get here. Yeah. And that's deterring as well. Some people are coming just for their education, because we do have world-class post-secondary, which we're desperately trying to destroy. Anyway, but we do have world-class post-secondary education, but people are getting it and then turning around and going to another country with that training. There's a significant brain drain happening in Canada, not just within our old stock of people, but it's a brain drain of people, potential people coming in. We're losing them too. And then we end up with a bunch of people who, just work service sector jobs, and that's not helping the whole economy. That's not going to help us.
So, okay, let's change our show from the House of Cards to the House of Lies.
Well, it really is. It really is that. Well, you know what it is, and I've always been a black sheep, right? I've been a black sheep in my own family because I can't lie. I really hate lies, and lies pile up, and they become this evil little entity in your own heart and your own mind, and I just refuse to allow them in. Right? They don't jive well with me. So to avoid lies, I've always just said it, no matter how hard it hurts. You know what I mean? And you become largely unpopular when you say things that are true, but they're painful, right? And that's what people are trying to avoid. Really, this is what politicians try to avoid. You know, Pierre Poilievre and Danielle Smith recently, they had a photograph with someone who had a shirt that said, "Thank a straight person for your existence, straight pride." And it was a joke, right? It was a total joke. But and at the time they saw it as a joke, and they had their picture taken. But then when the backlash came, they denounced it instead of saying it's a joke, people. Like, it was a joke. Instead, they don't want to tell the truth to a bunch of people that are, you know, riled up about a thing. Just be honest with people, right? Especially when it comes to economic situations. Yeah, you know, the city of Vancouver, it's run by homeowners, and they're not lowering the price of homes because they don't want to lose the equity in their homes, right? They have no incentive to make things more affordable because they're the ones who are invested in it. Like, people need to understand that this is where it all comes from.
Yeah.
But they'll feed you all these lies like, oh, it's the Chinese immigrants, they're causing the prices of houses to go up. No, they're not. They're not. And if they are, it might be a minuscule portion of the economy in Vancouver, but it's not the whole thing. People need to stop lying, and people need to stop buying the lies, is what it is.
Well, I was giving my son a hard time. He does a lot of investing, Bitcoin, stock markets. He's done very well, so he's got to be halfway intelligent. But there was one thing that I was like, I don't get it. So you know how when you get a delivery from Amazon, it's always in a box that is 10 times bigger than what the item actually is. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. Or it's in a bag.
Okay.
Depending.
Yeah. Well, for me, it consistently comes, you'll have a small little item and the box is huge. So I said to my son, like, what is that? Does Amazon actually own the delivery vehicles too as well? Because basically,
Yes.
they are making sure that it takes 10 more delivery cycles to carry the same product because of the size of the packaging that they're putting stuff in. So he was like, yeah, they own the vehicles, they own the cardboard companies or whatever. And I'm like, so how does this help the environment with the zero emissions? Why isn't there more regulation on these companies to change their practices? So this is where I challenge him, because he's invested in this carbon storage company. And what this latest scam is, I challenged him that I thought it was
and that's what it is. It's a scam, yeah.
It's that these companies are saying that they're going to store carbon. They're getting all sorts of grants from the government to do this. They store the carbon below ground, and then they give credits to these companies. Mm-hmm. So because they say they have stored, 10 carbon things, then they can go to Amazon. Okay, now you get the credit of the 10 carbon. So you don't actually have to change what you're doing at all because we've offset this carbon exchange thing. So I'm like, okay, how do they capture carbon? I don't know. It's through some fan and a solvent, and then it's below ground. And it's like, do you know how crazy that sounds? That is just so ridiculous. And yet all sorts of government money is going into these scammer companies, mm-hmm. because that's what they are. It's mm-hmm. taking taxpayer money and it's going through these scammer companies. And again, all of the resources that should be ours are going and being diverted to other people that are just raping and pillaging us.
Well, you know what they are. I mean, this isn't a new concept. This is actually Martin Luther. The original Martin Luther fought against this concept, and several other concepts. He was part of the Reformation of the church, 15th century, a long time ago. And the concept was indulgences. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but the indulgences were this concept that the papistry, the bishops and the Pope and all these people, they were all super good. They had original sin, but they became so good because they were clergymen that they were extra good. And they had extra double good points and all this other stuff, right? So you as a sinner, you could come to us and we could offset your sins by giving you these extra good points.
You pay for it?
Yeah. Indulgences were something people paid for. And it was corruption.
Okay, I didn't know that.
It was massive corruption. And this is what they've done. They've taken the centuries-old idea of indulgences from the Catholic Church, and they've reapplied it to this new religion of the new god Gaia that they're celebrating and in this climate catastrophe cult. It's really interesting when you look at it from a grand scheme way of looking at it, and you have clever people with clever people in industry and in markets that come up with new financial tools to trade these things, and that's exactly what they're doing. It's BS. It's all BS at the end of the day.
I know.
That's what it is.
House of Lies, Chapter 2.
It really is. It really is. And you know what? I think this is a good point to end the stream on this one. Corinne, I want to thank you so much again for joining me. We're talking well into the dark hours in where you're at. It's amazing. But thank you so much. Where can people get a hold of you online, and if they want to contact you, if they want to read what you're doing?
I've switched over to kootenaitribe.ca. You can sign up for our email if you want that email. But we are trying to post on there as much current information as possible so that you're at least aware of the potential issues that you could be running into. And like you said, it's probably a good idea to be thinking about buying a new gas vehicle right now.
Yeah, get on it. Get on it soon.
And start anticipating, because it is being set up to really take us out. And so yeah, thanks for chatting with me, because I always enjoy the fact that we get to talk about the real things, and there's no labeling that we're all anti whatever. It's just, no, this is just the information.
I see us as pro lots of things, not anti anything, and that's really how I look at stuff. I gotta stop being anti anything these days. Yeah, I'm with you. All right. Thanks, buddy. Well, I really appreciate that we can have these chats. Yeah, hold on the line. I'm just going to end the stream here before we get out of here, and I'll chat with you afterwards, because I want to get a bit more information about maybe some of the contacts that you have. But yes, everybody out there, I'll be in the Discord in a little bit. I do this every week. I go hang out in the Discord after the live streams. So I'll pop in there in a bit. I'm just going to talk again with Corinne Mori here for a little bit before I head off into that. Big thanks to Corinne. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we'll see everybody in the next one. Keep on trucking, everyone.